video, I will be explaining what emotional eating is and the detrimental effects it can have on your health if you do not get it under control. If this is the first time to the channel, welcome. My name is Andy Jalajawara Lindsay. I am the Supreme Health Coach and the Emotional Eating Detox Coach, and you are so welcome here. So, we all like to eat, right? And we all eat for various reasons. On the one hand, we eat to nourish the organs and the cells of our body so that we can remain strong and we have energy to do the things that we want to do. But on the other hand, we also eat for enjoyment. We eat for celebration. We eat for connection with our loved ones. And we also eat for the sheer delight of taste and texture in our mouths. And that's a beautiful thing. It's such a treat, and it's one of the wonderful things that makes life so enjoyable. But for many of us, eating can become an issue. It can become an issue when we use it as a coping mechanism to manage or assuage our emotions. Sharing food can be such a joyful experience, bringing people together and making lasting memories. But for many of us, food can be a huge issue if we use it as a coping mechanism for managing or masking or filling in the void in our emotions. In emotional eating, there's an inability to recognize hunger and fullness cues, and also an inability to perhaps regulate our emotions. So emotional eating can become a quick fix, a way to soothe our brokenheartedness or our troubled minds. It becomes a way of managing emotions such as loneliness, boredom, sadness, brokenheartedness, anger, stress. Basically, the emotions we experience every day. In the case of negative emotions, what we're really seeking is an increase in dopamine, a chemical that promotes feelings of well-being and is released in the brain after eating highly palatable foods, which is why some people are drawn to eating while experiencing emotional discomfort. On the flip side, happiness, celebration, and deservedness can also be triggers for emotional eating. Times when we want to celebrate a milestone, times when we have overcome, when we have triumphed after being the underdog, times when we want to celebrate triumphantness, triumphing. These are the times when we want to celebrate, and we can trip up into over-celebrating, feeling so deserved in what we have achieved that the celebration means that we are consuming more and more and more, and maybe more often as well than is necessary. Do any of these scenarios sound familiar? Mindless eating. Eating without paying attention to what or how much you're consuming, or eating when bored. Eating alone, preferring to eat in solitude rather than with others. Stress eating, turning to food as a way to cope with stress. Eating to overcome a feeling of powerlessness, or eating when there simply is a lack of hunger. To summarize, when life feels overwhelming, food can feel like a panacea, something to jump into, to feel comfort from, to feel surrounded by and nurtured by. And this is the most dangerous form of eating, when eating becomes a response to emotions or to fill an emotional void rather than eating when physically hungry. But let's be clear, it's a harmful coping mechanism. The emotions that follow of guilt, shame, helplessness perpetuates a vicious cycle where on the one hand you're eating to deal with emotions, But then comes a flood of other emotions that then perpetuates more eating. And there you are in the vicious downward spiral of emotional eating. It's a complex issue that affects millions of individuals across the globe, and it leads to not only physical degradation of the beautiful human form, but emotional distress and more brokenheartedness. We feel trapped in an endless cycle of guilt and shame, a roller coaster of temporary relief. Physically, emotional eating impacts our overall health and well-being. It contributes to debilitating, non-communicable diseases and also eventually premature death. Here are some other debilitating effects of emotional eating. Impaired emotional regulation. Relying on food to cope with emotions that prevent the development of healthier emotional regulation skills. And this dependence on food can hinder personal growth and emotional resilience. Increased risk of mental health issues. Emotional eating is often linked to mood disorders such as depression and anxiety. And over time, it can exacerbate these conditions and increase the risk of developing further mental health issues. Reduced self-esteem. Frequent episodes of emotional eating erode self-esteem and confidence. Negative emotions and self-criticism can intensify, making it more challenging to break the cycle. Disconnection from hunger cues. Emotional eating can totally disrupt your connection with your natural hunger and fullness cues, and this can lead to further overeating and an inability to respond to genuine physical hunger. Relationships. Emotional eating can affect personal relationships as it may lead to isolation or withdrawal from social situations. It can also put a strain on relationships when loved ones express concern about the habit. Financial implications. Frequent consumption of comfort foods can lead to increased food expenses, particularly when you might be ordering foods continually and potentially straining your budget. Reduced productivity. Emotional eating can lead to fatigue, lethargy, and reduced productivity, as it often involves the consumption of high sugar, low nutrient foods that cause energy crashes as blood sugar crashes after the high. Unhealthy food choices. Emotional eating typically involves the consumption of less nutritious foods, and these foods are often high in sugar, unhealthy fats, empty calories, processed snacks, which all have a detrimental effect on your health. In addition to weight gain and obesity, emotional eating can increase the risk of chronic health conditions, including type 2 diabetes, high blood pressure, and cardiovascular diseases. Poor body image. Emotional eating can lead to dissatisfaction with one's body and appearance, as it often reinforces negative self-perception and contributes to body dysmorphia and augmenting, etc. It's crucial that you understand that emotional eating is not your fault. But I promise you that breaking free from emotional eating is possible. The first step is recognizing it and awareness that it might be an issue in your life. It's also important to recognize that emotional eating is not a character flaw. You are not to blame. You are not weak. Emotional eating has become a phenomena, a modern day phenomena that millions of people suffer from due to an environment where profits are now associated with food. Let me put it this way, huge profits are now associated with food. And we have all become victim to advertising, promotion, and the awareness and ability of highly addictive foods, highly addictive foods that can be delivered to us, highly addictive foods that we have access to 24 hours of the day. It is no wonder so many of us struggle with emotional eating. But the first step to overcoming and healing from emotional eating is to let go of the guilt and the shame. Being kind to yourself is crucial. Being compassionate with yourself, being patient with yourself. I too have suffered from emotional eating, where I suffered from mood swings, fatigue, and finally ended up in hospital and even lost my business. The negative impact on my life was huge, as I was exposed to the emotion of societal and family shame directed at me. And it all began with a huge emotional and spiritual shock to my system when a friend took their own life at the age of 23. My life spiraled out of control in grief that resulted in eating one meal for months and resulted in anemia. Check out my playlist for the full story. But this doesn't have to be the story for you. By identifying your triggers and understanding your emotional needs, you can begin to learn how to cope with your emotions in healthier ways. It's all about understanding when, why, where, and what you turn to when your heart is hurting, and finding healthier ways to nurture yourselves. If you are still questioning whether you are eating emotionally, check the link below for a free workbook that will guide you and reveal the most prominent emotions that you might be struggling with. Some further issues that you may be able to overcome once you manage your emotional eating: digestive issues, bloating, parasites, candida, stubborn weight gain, hormone imbalances, fatigue, and brain fog. And here are some NCDs that you can manage to avoid once you get your emotional eating under control. And these figures are related to 2020, the global deaths in 2020. And let's also remember that these diseases are very painful. Cardiovascular disease, 17.9 million. Cancer, 9.3 million. Heart disease, 8.89 million. Stroke, 6.19 million. Respiratory diseases, 4.1 million. COPD, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, 3.13 million. Diabetes, 1.5 million. I hope you found that video informative and useful. I'd love to hear about your own personal emotional eating journey. The why, the what, the when, what it reveals to you, and how you try to cope with that. Until the next time, namaste, one love, peace, hetepu.